How's it going, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Baking World Tour, where today we're actually not baking, we're frying. Let me introduce to you the beautiful fat cake. And it is truly a fat cake. It's a deep fried dough, kinda like a donut, filled with meat. And it's a common street food snack in Botswana and other African countries too. But look at that beauty. I never thought of combining donuts and meat, but it works so well. All this needs is a good dipping in a chili sauce. So if you love donuts, and if you love meatballs, then this is definitely a video for you. And did I mention, they are super easy to make. So let's get to it and see what we need. For the dough, we'll need some strong white bread flour, buttermilk, a whole egg, yeast, salt, sugar, some soft butter. For the filling, I got some ground beef, onions and garlic, some salt and pepper, a little bit of oil, some curry powder, and some chopped coriander. And of course we'll need some oil for frying the donuts in. I'm using rapeseed oil, but you can use any oil you like. Now onto the equipment, of which there isn't much, just a pot for frying, a bowl, scales, a dough scraper and a temperature probe. Now let's start by getting the filling ready. In a pan on medium heat, add the oil, the onion and the garlic and the salt and pepper. Give it a quick stir and cook it for around 3 minutes. We're not going to cook the meat. All we want to do here is cook off the onions and the garlic, the curry powder, and we'll also add the coriander at the end. This will help with mellowing out the flavors. Raw onion and raw garlic can be quite harsh. And the same goes for the curry powder, so when you cook them down a little bit, we mellow out the flavors. After adding the curry powder and the coriander, just keep stirring for around 30 more seconds and that'll be enough. Now transfer it to a bowl and let it cool down completely. Once the mix has cooled down, get the ground beef and combine the two. Mix everything together well. And while I started mixing with a spoon, I soon realized that it's not very effective and finished the mix by hand. Once you've mixed up everything well, you want to weigh the meat and then divide it into 10 equal pieces. And I'd strongly suggest using your scales when you're dividing this, because eyeballing it is not that easy. So get a plate or something, place it on your scales, weigh the meat, divide it into 10, and then weigh it out into individual meatballs. Now if you want your fat cakes to be smaller, you can divide the meat and the dough into more pieces. But regardless of how many you want to make, after dividing, you want to shape them into nice round balls. This will make it easier for us to wrap the dough around them later on. I'm going to place them on this plate, wrap them up with cling film, pop them in the fridge until I need them. If you don't have a lot of time, you can make the meat mix whilst the dough is proofing. I had plenty of time on my hands, so I did it before I made the dough. And speaking of the dough, you want to use cold egg and cold buttermilk. Because we're kneading this by hand, it's going to warm up. Using cooler ingredients will prevent the dough from overheating whilst you're kneading it. Now in a large bowl, add the egg, the salt, the sugar, the yeast and the buttermilk. Mix it well. You want to dissolve the sugar and the salt and hydrate the yeast. Now add the butter and the flour. Then you can grab your scraper and mix it to a dough. You want to mix this dough in the bowl until there's no more dry flour left. Only then pop it out on your table. This dough should not be very sticky, especially if you're using strong flour. So I'm going to use the regular kneading method. What I like to do is press down and forwards with the heel of my right hand, then using the fingers of my left hand I fold the piece of dough on the heel of my right hand, then turn it and repeat. Once you've done this a few times, the motion will become fluent. It will be like second nature. Kneading this small piece of dough should not take more than 5 to 6 minutes. Now pop it in a bowl and take its temperature. Around 25 to 26 degrees Celsius is just about right for this. Now we're going to cover it up and leave it to ferment for around 2 to 2.5 hours, or until it doubles in size. And this one's risen pretty well. If yours is taking longer, leave it for longer. If it's rising rapidly, well then cut the fermentation time down. But if it looks like this, it's time to divide it. Again, use your scales, just as you did with the meatballs. And of course you want to divide your dough in the same number of pieces. I got 10 meatballs, so I'm going to make 10 dough balls. You can use a light dusting of flour, but don't overdo it. It's always easier to add more than to take off. By the way, if you really love donuts, I got a nice recipe on my channel in the enriched dough playlist. But back to these fat cakes. After dividing, you want to shape them into nice round balls. So flatten the dough out, fold the edge over the middle, going around in a circle to reach point where you started. Then flip it smooth side up, tighten it against the table. Pick it up, pinch the seam together at the bottom, and that's your dough ball done. If you can't be bothered doing that, then you can try this. Just snap them into shape. I mean, it takes a bit of practice. But jokes aside, I would love it if it was this easy. I'm gonna pop these on a plate, cover them up, and leave them to rest. because after shaping, they're a bit tense, and it will be near impossible to stretch the dough out properly to fill it up with the meatballs. So the resting stage is crucial here. The gluten will get some time to relax, and the dough itself will get some time to ferment. I'll give it 30 minutes, but if your dough has been fermenting rapidly up until now, you can cut it down to 20 minutes. A quick note on the meatballs. I took them out the fridge half an hour before the final shaping of the fat cakes. I don't want them to be too cold, because they're going to bring down the temperature of the dough. But again, that could be used to your advantage. If your dough is fermenting really rapidly, then use cold meatballs. It may as well slow your fat cakes down. But regardless of what you have to do, stretch out your dough ball, place the meatball right in the center, and then fold the dough around and seal it up. And seal it up well. You really want to pinch that seam together. If you don't pinch it together properly, it will open up as it's frying. And trust me, that won't be fun. And don't ask me how I know. Anyway, round off your fat cake, and that's the shaping done. I mean, talk about the basic recipe. This is the simplest thing in the world. And if you messed up that first one, well, you got plenty more to practice on. Now place your fat cakes seam side down on a plate or on a tray that's been well dusted with flour. And leave plenty of space between them, because they will expand as they rise. The final proofing time will depend on how rapidly your dough has been fermenting up until now, and the temperature of your kitchen. The rise on these will not be very visible, so don't expect them to get massive, because they won't. But around an hour to an hour and a half should do it. And as you can see, they are puffing up a little bit. Now make sure your oil is preheated by the time they finish rising. And speaking of oil temperature, the temperature control in this recipe is crucial. It cannot be too high. Around 140 degrees Celsius, which is around 280 Fahrenheit. It cannot be higher than that. Now drop your fat cakes in and fry them for 10 minutes. The raw meat inside will take some time to cook, so if the oil is too hot, the dough will overcook before the filling gets time to cook properly. Flip them over after every minute. By the way, chopsticks are the best tool for this. Then just keep flipping and frying, and 10 minutes later they should be nicely golden brown and fully cooked. Now drain them off, and that's your fat cake. So what do you think of this deliciousness? Have you ever tried anything like this before? Have you ever heard of it? Let me know down in comments. And if you have any questions or suggestions or any thoughts, also let me know. And check out some more Baking World Tour videos. It's full of interesting recipes. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.